Welcome everybody. I'm glad we're going to get to talk about Traefik and Let's Encrypt and casual hosting today. It's been a lot of fun working on it. I actually implemented Traefik. We were just Nick and I were just talking about whether it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. It's got some miles on it now. But I haven't really been in there for a long time. And I had always intended to go back and make Let's Encrypt work with it, and I had never gotten to it. So because of the pressure of this, I was able to spend some time on it in the last week or so and make sure that it was ready. So looking forward to it and looking forward to going through that with you. Let's go around and introduce ourselves. I'm Randy Fay. I'm the lead maintainer of DDEV. I'm in Palisade, Colorado, which is in the U.S., kind of in the center of the country, and very near the western edge of Colorado, between the desert and the mountains. And Mark, go ahead.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark Lebrec. I'm located in the west coast of Canada. Yeah, I've been working with DDEV for a number of years now, and mostly Drupal developer, but branching into other things as well now. Yeah, that's it for me.
Bernardo?
Good morning. Bernardo Martinez. I work out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I work in Drupal, primarily in the government sector. But recently I've been doing a lot of evangelism, which has been great. And then, so these trainings are usually fantastic to pick up tips, and why not and take it and do sessions with them.
It's great. You know what I love, your voice is so great. But you have a Spanish accent, right? But you have a Southern accent mingled on it. How long have you been in Chattanooga? Don't you have a little Southern accent thrown in there?
Probably by now, yes. I've been here for maybe 5 to 7 years, so it's probably trickled in, and why not with friends and
You
why
have,
not?
it's kind of it's interesting and very pleasant to listen to. Ralph, go ahead.
Hello, I'm Ralph from Nuremberg, Germany. Mainly in content strategy and using Drupal and yeah, and mainly attending the UX and accessibility groups and also using DDEV for a while.
A while. Yeah. Um, did you lose some hair?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
No, you got the same amount of hair. Okay, just not okay. It's just hidden. You got it hidden behind your Target t-shirt.
I've got the same. Well, I'll introduce myself. I'm Nick. I'm brand new to DDEV. I discovered it a few weeks ago and was immediately blown away and sold on it after years of futzing with all sorts of different development environments. And I mainly work in WordPress, but I've branched out into various other kind of backend services and things. And so I'm eager to both learn more about DDEV as well as contribute some perhaps improvements or enhancements to both the WordPress, as well as I'm working on making some sort of add-on to use Cloudflare tunnels to maybe be able to easily serve your local DDEV sites publicly. And yeah, so I've been watching all the back videos, all the training sessions and stuff. And I should say that Randy has a fantastic voice as well. If it wasn't development, I think you'd be in radio announcing or something like that. But no, I'm very grateful to DDEV and to Randy and to the community and everything for making it such a wonderful tool and such great documentation and everything. And I'm very eager to see how I can contribute. And I'm looking forward to our session today.
Great to have you here. Great to have you here. Thanks everybody for coming. That's fantastic. What we're going to look at today is the router, and the router's job is to take incoming HTTP traffic. It can only handle HTTP and HTTPS traffic, and to send it where it needs to go. And that's true of everything that you call a router. Well, not everything, some routers do more sophisticated things than that, but almost all of you with sites that you have deployed have a router in front of things to get traffic, HTTP traffic, to the service that it needs to go to. Sometimes it's called a reverse proxy, which is quite a mouthful. And sometimes the behavior is a load balancer, which is often doing a similar thing or related kind of things. But I think router is probably the easiest way to think about these things. So the DDEV router started out as an Nginx proxy reverse router, and it was that for quite a number of years, and it did a good job. It was just an Nginx configuration running in a Docker container, and it would take incoming traffic and send it where it needed to go. But essentially, we forked that back in the who knows when, and it didn't get any maintenance, and the upstream wasn't getting any maintenance either. And it was very difficult to understand or to use or to improve. And so people asked about Traefik, Traefik. And apparently Traefik is the correct way to say it, I think, according to their website. They chose a great name if you can spell it, but they got the namespace for sure, which was a great thing. But Traefik, which is I think at traefik.io, Traefik has extensive history, extensive documentation, and is very, very, very maintained and has a great presence. I think Lando uses Traefik as its router, doesn't it? Is that right, Bernardo? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, Traefik is such a great router that it has made inroads everywhere. And Traefik also is used in production sites. And so people put it in front of things. Its other job besides routing, in our case, is to do TLS termination. So it's in charge of handling, of managing certificates and handling the TLS challenge and all of those things that happen. If you think about it, that could be done at the individual service level. For example, at the HTTP server, our web server, and our web server actually knows how to do it, but then you are doing it everywhere, and it really is very difficult. So having it done one place by a router is a good thing. Take care of that TLS. So routing can be done by host name. It can be done by path. I'm not sure why in our context we would use it for anything but by host name. But maybe there's a way. Some of the Traefik examples show doing things by path. Well, I mean, you could take path stuff and split it off to different DDEV projects. Like you've seen production sites that do that, where maybe there was a site that is now accessible by a path that is actually on a different server. But that would be an unusual local development thing. But Traefik is capable of that. Most routers would be capable of doing that. Any questions about those so far? Feel free to stop me. There's a lot of jargon here, and happy to take a look at it. And Alberto, great to see you. He's not quite in the audio world yet, but he will be shortly. Great to see you, Alberto. I'm going to share my screen, and let's take a look at a typical DDEV setup with it. Um, so I am going to just go to the actual Traefik URL for a DDEV project. Let me just go ahead and show this. If I do a DDEV list, you see that it shows that the router is there, where it's configured, and it gives the URL to the dashboard. And that's what we're using here. And that actually has some pretty useful things. I think most of us won't look at it unless we're working on the things that we're talking about today. But it is pretty great for that situation. So you see that on the dashboard, we have entry points, which is basically what ports are we listening to? So our Traefik instance is listening to 443 for HTTPS traffic and port 80 for HTTP traffic. And then Mailpit is on 8025 and 8026. And then, of course, the Traefik itself is handling the dashboard, and it does it using Traefik techniques. So in Traefik, we have the three components: routers, which is the thing that takes in traffic from an entry point and decides what to do with it. And then services are essentially they're essentially a configuration item that says, okay, then where are we going to send it? This might be a little too weird a thing to say, but I think of services like a Git remote. So when we, in Git, when we create a remote and we have done a fetch, we have actually brought the whole repository into our remote. And so it stands in as a replacement for the actual service itself. It's a representative, I guess we could say. And so I think of the services that way, and we'll take a look at the actual content of the configuration in a minute. And then the third piece of Traefik is called middlewares. And middleware, I know that a number of you have been around for a lot of years. Middleware is a big and useless word in many parts of the IT world. It always is easy to spout, but hard to define. But it's really easy to define here in Traefik. In Traefik, a middleware is a transformation rule. So in Traefik, you can add a header, and we'll see if we can do that today. So you can add a header as it's coming through. In Traefik, you can force a redirect, for example. So on the HTTP router, you can force a redirect with a middleware. You can rewrite the content of things beyond headers, I imagine. And Traefik has a whole bunch of built-in middlewares. Most of them don't seem very likely to me in the context that we use it, but I have tried out the adding the ones that can add or manipulate headers, and we will do the redirect one today as a demo. So Ralph posted the I assume that's the doc that proves that Traefik is what Lando uses for the router. Is that correct?
Yes.
One question, Randy. So
Yeah.
would you say that Traefik runs in front of Nginx and Apache, or that it uses Nginx and Apache, like on a conceptual level?
It is its own thing, and it is not using Apache or Nginx.
Oh,
So
okay.
if we take a look here and we do a Docker PS, I have just the one project running. Let me make this bigger. I have just the one thing running, and you see that we have DDEV web server here running, and we have Traefik running in front of it. If I started another project, and I start DDEV.com, for example, then Traefik is still just the one instance. There's and we're going to actually see new services pop up for this when this configuration gets to the router.
So I guess you would say conceptually, it intercepts the request before it gets to Nginx and then feeds it to either Apache or Nginx or whatever you're using after that.
Or actually to the web server, which may be running
Sure.
one of them. So if I do a Docker PS now, I have another web server running. So we got the got the second web server, but we only have the one Traefik router running.
Right.
It's still doing its job, and it's doing the job for those. And we should now see, if we follow into the routers, I should have gone to the routers before I did that, but here are the routers that have been created. I'm going to stop that one now because now I've made a mess. I should have showed the, now you see we have the services for DDEV.com and for D10, which is the one that we were looking at before. Sorry if I switch context too fast, just call me on it and we'll go back and look at it. I'm going to stop DDEV.com so that we get a simpler thing to look at. I should have been clicking through to the routers and services and middlewares so that we could look at these. And we're going to look at the textual format of these in just a moment. And do slow me down because I've had a few days to get my head back into this, and you're seeing it fresh. It is,
Randy,
it is not.
Could you go to the routers for a moment, please?
Gotcha, here we are.
Something that I noticed yesterday, and I see it here, and it also shows in the services, is if you look at the middle lines, the HTTP 8025 and 8026, that's the entry points, but then the name just has 8025. It has 8025 and HTTP for the HTTPS. Are you seeing what I'm saying?
So the entry point is a name for a port, essentially, and it is arbitrary. It's an arbitrary name, and it's defined in the I think in the static configuration, and so that's arbitrary name. So that's just saying, hey, this entry point, we're connecting up this router to the entry point on port 80.
Right, but what I'm pointing out is, I guess, look at, say, the third line. It says HTTP 443 instead of HTTPS 443, and then the next column it says 80 HTTPS, and then the next column 80 HTTP. So there's some inconsistencies like with regards to the port number. Like it says 443 in that line, and then 80 in the same line.
Yeah, so let's take a look at those. First of all, these entry point names are just names. So the only 4 that we care about here are these 4 that I'm pointing out right here, the HTTP 80, 443, 8025, and 8026. I apparently named those, and I have seen in Traefik examples these days, I think that maybe they call maybe in their example right now, they call HTTP 443, they might call it secure HTTP instead of 443. so I'm assuming that I probably named these, or perhaps I used an example, but these are just labels. They are not implying the protocol that we're using. So they're just labels. So this would be better labeled as port 80, port 443, port 8025, and port 8026. And that would be better labels for it. So then the rule is, what if I see something coming in on that, what do I do with it? So you see that we have a host regex that says if it's d10.ddev.site, the name of the router is here, and the name is also an arbitrary name that that I made, and that probably could be better. But this one is clearer. I think the name is clearer currently, although I think I can get rid of a couple of these. But the name is arbitrary, and it's just saying where stuff is coming from and where it's going to. And then the service is the one that actually does the job of sending it to where it's supposed to go. So the service, which we'll look at the actual configuration of, this one again is just a name, and it is saying that it's D10 going to the DDEV web server, coming from port 80 and going to HTTP. So it's an attempt at naming that may have failed. Does that help sort it out, that we're just looking at names on these? Yeah.
I don't think we've quite addressed what I was pulling up, but I'll make a GitHub issue so we don't get derailed too much right now.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure whether I'll be willing to muck with these, and whether that would impact existing configuration that people have. Most people aren't even aware that this configuration exists and don't care, but there are a few people who have custom configuration. And so let's just take a minute here, and let me get this out of the way. And we will take a look at the actual configuration files for each of these things. But before we take a look at the actual files that represent the router and the service and the middleware, do you have anything, questions, thoughts?
Was muted. We might cover it later, Andy, but one sort of use case that I'd like to go over is if you have multiple projects in one project, if that makes any sense. So if you had like a migration where you're doing D7 and D10, I think this is in the documentation, but it might be good to just go over it if you have time.
Yeah, so a lot of times when people are doing a migration, like I hope I'm getting your question correctly. When people are doing a migration, they will run two projects side by side and let the one talk to the other. So that's the you're talking about, right?
That is, yeah. I couldn't remember if it was like if you included it in the same DDEV project or you had two separate. I think you're right. I think that is the more common way to do it.
You can't do it with two databases in one server, but it's really nice to do side by side so that you can access both of them and look at both of them at the same time. But the one that is actually having a migration happen, like a D10 or D11 or whatever, the one that's actually having a migration happen can actually access the database of the other one without changing it, but bring in the stuff. But that isn't related to anything that we're doing here with routing, because they can directly access each other. Okay. Okay, so here is no, I got an empty file. That's interesting. How does that work? I'll do a DDEV start to recreate it. I seem to have left an empty file here. And so the file that I want to demonstrate didn't exist. Because DDEV normally will be just creating these things for us, we don't normally have to think that these are even there or why they would matter or any of those things. Of course. So here's what I wanted. And can you see this okay? So here's the DDEV generated on top of it, which means that DDEV owns it and DDEV will overwrite it if that is there. And that's something that can catch us and may catch me as I demo this. But this is the config at the project level. So we are in, as you see, we are in my project called D10 in the .ddev Traefik directory. And we are looking at the file called config d10.yaml. And we're in the HTTP section. There is possibility of doing TCP routing with Traefik, but I don't think it matters to us. So HTTP routing is all that we care about. The routers that we have, which have been auto-generated by DDEV, are this first one that we were looking at in the graphical format a minute ago. This is the one that accepts, you see it has an entry point here from HTTP 80, which again is just a name. It means on port 80, I'm listening. I don't care about TLS. In other words, HTTP. I don't have HTTP enabled on that. And I want to deliver traffic that meets the rule to the service of this name, the D10 Web 80 HTTP. Inside the Docker network, we usually do only HTTP. It's possible to do other things, but it makes a mess with everybody having to terminate the TLS there. So, and then the rule that says, how do I get this, this router selected is here. This is a host regular expression that is matching d10.ddev.site. And, you know, that really should have a caret on the front of it to make sure that it matches the front and the end. I don't know that we'll actually change that. So there we have our router that takes port 80 and decides whether it belongs to it and decides where the traffic gets sent to, what service it gets sent to. And you see it has a middleware, you see that it has a middleware commented out there, and we'll uncomment that in a minute. And then 8025 and 8026 are there for Mailpit. We'll just ignore those for now. And then here is 80 and HTTPS, implying here that the target on this one is 80 and the input is HTTPS. The naming isn't that great, but here we have the same host regex, but here we say TLS is true, and we have the entry point of 443. So we have two. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. One thing, I think you might have answered what my question was now. I think you mentioned a couple minutes ago that within DDEV, within the Docker, it only uses HTTP. Is that what you said?
Inside the Docker network, right.
Okay. I think that might address what, yeah, I was kind of confused because, so I think what this is showing is saying that requests that come in via HTTPS 443 then get redirected to the HTTP 80.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, I get it now. I see. I was wondering why that was happening, but anyway, I'll leave you to it then.
So then you see that we have defined a middleware here, but we're not using it at this point because it's commented out above. And then we have the services, which are essentially a definition of where the traffic gets sent to. And so in our router above, we said that if we have something coming in on 80, we should send it to, actually on 80 and 443, it should send it to this one. That's actually a mistake from a while ago. You see that this one is the same as this one here. They have exactly the same behavior, and so why are there two of them? So I'm going to try in the PR that I'm working on to eliminate one of those because we don't need both of them. But the service says we're going to send it. This is the name of the container that we are looking to hit when we get the traffic that matches that. So DDEV containers are named with DDEV dash project name dash name. And so this is saying that I'm going to use HTTP to send that request on to port 80 in the DDEV web server, which is named DDEV D10 web. Does that make sense? If you understand the basic things that are going on with routers and services, then it starts to make sense in a little bit. And you'll see that we have this statement that it's a load balancer. And of course, we don't care about it being a load balancer because we only have one target for the traffic. But there it is. Okay. I should mention one thing that's very important from a security perspective, and that is that the old router, the Nginx proxy router, used to do traffic in a very common way where you would mount the Docker socket into the container. So at startup time, you would actually mount the Docker socket in there. And that actually is a beautiful thing because it lets the router just listen to Docker and auto discover what is happening. But the security consequences are enormous. And that means that if somebody compromises the router at all, that they own your computer, which isn't that great an idea. So having the router not mount the Docker socket into it was a primary design goal when we did this work on Traefik and the Traefik router. So when you read about Traefik, you'll see options of doing that mounting into the container and auto discovery. And instead of doing that, we are doing file-based discovery, and the files are automatically watched by Traefik and changed. And when we do a DDEV start, we push them in there. So let me show you a little bit about debugging. Feel free to stop me with questions anytime, as always. If I do a docker logs -f DDEV router, then we will see everything that this is doing. And if I do it's turned on with pretty verbose settings. If I do a curl-i, then we will see the debugging information and the head that a curl-i does on there. So we see that come through. And if we go in and we change the configuration, we can see the we can see Traefik respond to that. So this doing the Docker logs -f DDEV router is a fundamental technique for debugging, and hopefully in a couple of minutes we will try to do that and debug a Let's Encrypt configuration. If I go in, I'm going to just Docker exec into the DDEV router, just so that I can easily see the generated config that has been done for everything. And there, if I go into the config, and you see that the D10 .yaml has actually been pushed into there. This is the one that we were just looking at. And let's just say that I go in here and you remember that well, first of all, MailPit, we don't care about at all. So let's just get rid of these MailPit services. And remember that these other two are duplicates of each other. So I'm just going to remove those. And now I am going to go back to the routers, and now I don't need this router on 8025 for MailPit. I'm just getting rid of it. And here is the one that comes in on HTTPS. And since I now only have one service, I can change that to just that one. And I'll get rid of the 8025 one. And now I have it working pretty much the way I want. But if you watch the logs here, if I actually save this file, it reloads the configuration from those files and does the things that we need to do. So this is file-based configuration at its best. The one problem is that this is great. What I'm doing here is great for debugging, but it's not great for control, because I'm actually editing a copy of the configuration that is in the Docker volume. So the DDEV generated needs to go away. But when I'm trying to debug and trying to figure out what is right and wrong about a Traefik configuration, this is a pretty slick thing to be able to do, to be able to edit that and see it work as it goes. But again, it's not adequate for controlling what we're doing, which is on the host side. And we will do that in a second with Let's Encrypt, and we'll see if it happens to work. Let's go ahead and try the redirect situation. So I'm just going to get rid of what I've just done. Well, let's just go take a look first and see what the results are of what I've done. You see now, because I changed that, we have just the two routers now, and we have just the one service that matters. We got rid of the MailPit, and we have one redirect middleware that is available to us. And I think I'm going to try to do this in legitimate way instead of the illegitimate way that I was just doing. So what I'm going to do is actually do what you would really do to enable the redirect. So first of all, let's take it as it is. I'm going to do a DDEV restart to push back the exact things that we were working with already. And so we have normal behavior for this website. And then what I'm going to do is demonstrate HTTP, and then I'm going to demonstrate HTTP with the redirect. So we'll hope that that works. And I do think that I'll get a successful blog written up about this. So we'll get this documented a little bit. And I think there's probably some consequences for the DDEV docs as well. So now we should be back to our original configuration. We should have several routers. We've got the 8025 routers back. Everything is normal here. And right now, if I go to if I do the DDEV describe, and I go to the HTTP URL, it will work fine. So it, it doesn't really work fine because Chrome likes to redirect. So let me prove that it's not redirecting. So you see that this has got an OK when we're doing a curl. We are perfectly able to do HTTP. I can't demonstrate it very well unless I turn off Chrome's built-in redirection. But it is perfectly able to use HTTP right now. And you see it's got a 200 here. But I don't want it to. I want it to redirect. It's what most of us want for our websites. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the DDEV generated from this, saying that I'm taking over this file. And then I'm going to turn on the middleware here for redirect HTTPS. And redirect HTTPS is defined here. It's got a scheme, and we can say that it's permanent. These are the things that we would normally want. And since I've taken over this file, I should now be able to do a DDEV restart. And of course, you can do redirects. I think you probably all know how to do redirects in Apache and Nginx, and the docs explain how to do it in those contexts. But doing it in the router makes a lot more sense. It's earlier and it's less intrusive, and it's probably more reliable. I think all of you have failed with redirects in htaccess before. I would imagine we have all failed doing htaccess redirects or having explicit redirects. So theoretically, now if I do a curl to the HTTP, I have a permanent redirect, and in fact I do. So now I'll hit it and it'll do a redirect, but the browser probably got to it before I did. So it's not, so that's just one example. If you go and look at the middleware's documentation in the Traefik documentation, you'll see many examples of that. So.
And that would probably be a little more applicable for the casual hosting than perhaps for local, right? Or do you see any local benefits to redirecting?
Well, since redirection is just normal, I think it has benefits. Almost all of us need cores to be working right, and it doesn't work right if you're not using HTTPS. One of DDEV's great advantages is the integration with MakeCert, so that we have all of those things. So I think it's good. Let me try this out, Nick. So curl dash, oh, I see. Yeah, I use curl dash L always for downloads, and dash V, huh? It's harder to see though.
Yeah, maybe get rid of you could probably get rid of the verbose, and maybe it'll, I don't know, but I forget which, I think it's the L that
L also follow redirects. But this is great because it shows us that the redirect happened and then we went to the new one. So that's great because I haven't used curl dash I and L together. So that is great. So my next thing to demonstrate that I will go to if we don't have questions, but I'm happy to stop here. I know that there's a lot of stuff going on here and sometimes unfamiliar words too. But I want to show the casual hosting and Let's Encrypt that I worked so hard on. this last couple of days.
So the setting that we just saw with redirect is not there out of the box, right? That's something that we have to add.
That is correct. It is in the it's built in, but we added it. So here's the redirect HTTPS. So it was commented by default by DDEV. If we put that in by default, then I think that we would mess up, because there are people who use HTTP and there are valid uses of HTTP. So maybe, I don't know, that just sounds a little tricky to enable that by default, and different
And this
behavior.
is enable global. Can you do it per project if you just do it in the config for each project?
This actually is per project here. Here we did it in a project config, and I do not know if it can be done globally without a change to DDEV. I don't know, because DDEV is generating this code.
I've
Yeah,
been
Ralph.
playing with this stuff for the last few days and doing some Traefik add-ons, and my impression is that, especially when you're doing the add-ons, you define the add-ons, which are like external GitHub repos. You define them in the static Traefik YAML, just to be available globally. But then you dynamically per project you enable them, like Randy's shown here. I don't know if that's quite answering it, but yeah, I think they're enabled on a per project, per service kind of basis.
So I haven't shown the global configuration, but the static config that we're talking about is a number of the things, like including the entry points that I was telling you that they're just names. Here's where the names come from. This is in the global stuff. So anyway, yeah. So there may be another way to do it. Ralph, go ahead.
Just one general question. I wonder, as not a developer nor very technical, but I just wonder from a usability perspective, Traefik just works, but what I've read is that it's pretty mighty and capable, and I wonder what would be convenient and tricks or use cases you could realize with Traefik for the general user that could be useful instead of just working, and yeah, add some additional value.
Yeah, so there are many, many things you can do, but they're all pretty advanced use cases, I think. Like I say, a few people have used custom Traefik config, but you could have one URL point to two different projects. You could have two URLs point to the same project. You can do Let's Encrypt like we'll do in the next couple of minutes if we are successful. But I mean, the whole reason that DDEV is trying to generate default standard things that nobody has to think about or even know that it exists is so that people don't have to deal with that. So it is definitely tweaky. It is definitely tweaky. Well, let's just see if we can succeed with a Let's Encrypt setup. And what I'm going to do is I am going to take two windows here and log in to an internet accessible site called jumphost.thephase.us. And what I'm going to do is on this site, I have a demo project. And I think that I have everything set up properly. And what I'm going to do is follow the instructions in the PR for casual web hosting, casual hosting that is in progress. kind of as a result of what we're doing here. This goes through how you can take an internet connected site. It has to be reachable on the internet, and you have to be able to have DNS to work with it. This walks you through the steps of what you can do. This has always been there, but it wasn't available until the PR that I'm working on. It wasn't available for Traefik. It was available for the old router. And you have to obviously open up your firewall. You have to set up your DNS so that it points. So for example, I have, if I ping jumphost.thephase.us, it has an IP address. And if I ping, I actually have a wildcard, demo.jumphost.thephase.us. So they all resolve to the same thing. So I have set that up already in DNS. So then the other things that you have to tell DDEV to do are to bind the router on all interfaces. For security reasons, the default with DDEV is that it binds only on localhost so that nobody on your local network can get to it. And then we're going to omit the SSH agent, use hardened images. DDEV has a set of images that, for example, don't have sudo in them. Performance mode none means that just mutagen is not compatible with this and not useful because we're doing Linux hosting. And then the key thing here is use Let's Encrypt, and the Let's Encrypt email have to be specified. So there's a start, and then we configure it, and we have the project TLD set so that it's the right thing. This explains how to do the redirect, which we don't have to worry about right now. And now we're going to see if we can make this work. It does do most of the configuration on its own. So I'm going to do a DDEV. Make sure that we've got the right things set here. I think we have everything set up to say use Let's Encrypt. And we have the Let's Encrypt email set. And it might work. And so let's just see what happens with that as it contacts Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt does have a rate limit, and I've hit that a number of times. And then, as the docs say, I've had to switch to elsewhere. I think we just saw the Traefik. See, the server validated our request. It went out. It went to Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt gave it a. I think we probably it might be working. Let's just see what happens here. And lo and behold, it did work. And if we go in and look at the certificate, we can look at the certificate, and sure enough, we just got a certificate issued from Let's Encrypt. I should have stopped for a moment and said what Let's Encrypt is. I think probably all of you have run across it. But Let's Encrypt is a free public service for valid certificates for websites, which has changed the world, and of course has resulted in almost all websites having valid HTTPS now. But having this integrated into Traefik and now into DDEV's Traefik implementation is pretty stinking cool. And now I could go and I could do a number of things with this, but I think I'm not going to because we have absorbed enough and we're at the end of our hour anyway. But one of the first things that I would do now is I would enable that middleware to do the redirect, because certainly on a site on the internet, we don't want HTTP to be available. And on a, so I would certainly do that. And what I would do if we had a little more time is I would go to the staging server. And what happens when you go to the staging server is you don't get rate limited, but you do get an invalid certificate. So when you get the invalid certificate, you look at it and say, well, that's not a valid certificate, but you go look and you find out that you did in fact get it from Let's Encrypt. So let me just stop talking and questions, comments, thoughts, things buzzing around your head, go ahead.
I'm very interested in this casual hosting. I want to try this out. You said that this isn't in the current stable version, so are you targeting 0.24 for this? Or
Yeah,
where
1.23.3 will have this.
Oh, okay.
And it will be in head in a few days. So
Great.
it will be available. It's already available, but with the old router. And
Right.
so that's the big change here. So I've been using this for my small sites for probably 3 or 4 years, but it hasn't been compatible with Traefik because it just got left out. So
Have you had any problems with it going down and how you having to go into the server and restart DDEV manually, or is it pretty reliable in that way?
So the instructions tell you what to do, and I haven't, really, I haven't had any trouble. The only trouble I have is here. Let me just show you the docs, because the docs are pretty good and they've had some good community contribution. It's here in the additional server setup. So you have to do the Linux setup things right so that it starts when you reboot, and it stops predictably when it's going down. So every so often, even though I have this all set correctly, I have had on a reboot it not all come back correctly, but most of the time when I reboot, it comes back fine. And this does work absolutely wonderfully for staging sites or demo sites for customers. And there are, there's a modest number of people using it that way because it's so simple and so familiar, and it works just like what we work with every day, because it is what we work with every day.
Awesome.
One thing that is different between the old and the new is that Let's Encrypt certs are only good for 90 days by default, and they can only be renewed, I think, at 45 days. And the old approach requires a cron job. Actually, maybe I have to take that out of here. It probably still says that you have to have it. The old way, you have to have a cron job that forces the renewal. And I'm pretty sure that this new way that that the router, that Traefik itself, is doing the renewal for us. But I always have monitoring on all of my sites to make sure that I know if they're going to expire. I hope you do too. So.
Randy, I thank you for the presentation. I have one question. How does this work with nrock? Do you have to do any special change when implementing the DDEV share command, or it's totally automatic? Or
how does it work with
nrock?
With ngrok, this has nothing to do with ngrok. So what ngrok does? So if I do if I'm here on a regular project, let's go to a regular project on my regular machine. And if I do it, let's see if it's running here. If I do a DDEV share here, that actually just runs ngrok, and ngrok is a service, which is a freemium or a, you know, service that actually puts my local traffic onto this port here, which is a completely different technique, unrelated to what we were doing. What we're doing is actually running a project that looks the same because it's umami. We're actually running it on a internet reachable machine, which is completely different from what DDEV Share and ngrok are doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I'm familiar with Enro, but one of the things that it could be, I was thinking it would be nice to have is that for now Enrock is totally, I mean, from the DDEV point of view, Enrock is totally transparent. The container doesn't know that it's listening in a different URL. But sometimes I would like to, anytime that I run DDEV Share and I have my Enrock configured in the container, that anytime that I run, for example, DDEV, how is this command for opening a website in the I have it automated, but anyway, that the container is aware that it's listening that URL and it opens automatically in the URL. And I was thinking, how can, if this traffic is something that could be configured to also be aware of the Enrock URL, but I understand it's totally transparent and that is nothing related. So there are two separate layers of things. So
Yeah, actually, Nick is actually working on a Cloudflare implementation of sharing as opposed to ngrok. And that's a pretty cool idea. And it actually might be able to solve some of the problems that some CMSs have. Some CMSs have this nasty habit of embedding their URL into their database and into their settings file. And it causes a lot of pain. Most CMSs don't, but it's a nasty habit for the ones that do, like WordPress and Magento.
Should I
Okay.
comment a bit on that, or are we running out of time?
Yeah, we're at the end of our time, but we'll
Okay.
look forward to your
Sure.
explorations. We're definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, maybe we can do another session or something some other time, and I can introduce what I'm working on because it's pretty relevant to all the stuff we've talked about today.
We're looking forward to your blog post and your demo, so that'd be great. Any other thoughts, questions, expansions? This is definitely the mixture of ideas between running a site that is live and real as a demo site, or as a, as a client demo site, or as a staging site, and using Let's Encrypt, and as opposed to using DDEV Share. Those are definitely ideas that cross over with each other because they have similar applications, but they're unrelated ideas, but they're similar. And it's nice to have lots of ways to solve every problem, because then you're not stuck with one of them, right? So.
If I could just say one thing, I'll leave the Cloudflare stuff aside, but one thing perhaps that we didn't mention or cover about Traefik is that you can also create custom middleware add-on plugin sort of things, and they're written in Go, but they have a template thing, which it seems very simple to follow, and it allows you to kind of dynamically, I don't think you even have to restart the Traefik, I'm not sure, but it allows you to sort of inject it. And so what Randy showed with the redirect HTTPS, I think that's built into Traefik, but you can have custom middlewares to do anything really. And so I'm using one plugin that I found that can rewrite the response body, the HTML response. And so I'm using it with regards to what Randy was just talking about with WordPress, how it only has sort of an embedded URL. So when it responds with the URLs for the various assets, static assets, I'm rewriting it all to a different URL before it gets out to the internet. And so that's one option. But yeah, I'll go into a lot more detail in the next, I don't know, week or whenever I'm ready with it.
Look forward to it. Yeah, it's got loads of potential, and the middlewares, if you just look at the ones that are built in, you see that they are pretty robust ones that are built in. But then if you follow that to the contrib ones, they're everywhere. The problem is the same as this problem always is. You don't know how good they are, or how maintained they are, that kind of thing. And you don't know but the fact that you can just plug in something that's written in Go to it. The other thing that's really interesting about that, which is definitely a sidebar, is the way they do their Go plugins has potential for DDEV. So that's a really interesting thing as well. Any other questions or thoughts or anything else? I sure appreciate you coming today.
This is great. Thanks, Randy. I learned a lot here.
Looking forward to where this takes us. So thanks so much to everybody, and I'll stop the share and say thank you, and feel free to hang around, or if you have any other questions or related things, or if you want to hear Nick's approach.
I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah.
He'll tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very useful. I'm having this issue with Nrog and thinking about how could be the best way to fix it. Because as you say, some shops or some CMS they are not aware of the URL, or some others they have it in the settings file, and then it's a bit of a mess anytime you use Nrog. So yeah, probably there is not a perfect solution for this, but of course, if there are things coming, I will keep an eye on that. Very interested in that. So thank you for that work.
Looking forward to what Nick can come up with that. My little casual attempt didn't work out because I was trying to run it locally, of course, and because WordPress, for example, actually builds the URLs into its markup, the links wouldn't work anymore. So that's the place where Nick is going to solve the universe.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty confident I'll have it ready soon enough, and yeah, it should solve all these problems. It should simplify a lot of these things, and maybe even make somewhat redundant ngrok and even the new Let's Encrypt thing. But of course, as Randy said, it's good to have different options to approach a problem, and you can pick and choose what you want. But yeah, it should be. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has it, but or maybe it's better just to wait till I've got something to share.
Yeah,
Is it something that will integrate with the launch command? Now I remember. It's DDEV launch that you can open.
It could.
I don't. There.
I haven't. I'm still learning DDEV, but so I'm not quite sure the right way to kind of implement and deploy and integrate it all. But what I had in mind was perhaps it could be just like DDEV share Cloudflare or DDEV share ngrok, and you choose one or the other. But it could also be something else. It could be built into the start command or restart command, or it could be built